There we go. Cool. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. This is our September community call for Remake. We're very excited that you're here. If you're rejoining, having joined a previous call, you're going to know what we're going to cover today and be excited about it. And we also have a preview of some really exciting new initiatives that we're working on within the Remake community. And if you're new, thank you for joining and welcome. Remake is a rapidly growing global community of ambassadors, people from inside the fashion industry, labor organizers, and garment makers themselves who are uniting together to make fashion a force for good. And we're really excited that you're here. So thank you for joining. Today, we're going to revisit the Pay Up campaign and kind of talk about, what we accomplished there and the momentum that we created. And then we're also going to talk about how you can now carry that forward. And we're going to give you, very easy calls to action to help you, take action in this campaign and make your voice heard, and give you some tools and kind of insights from our ambassador community of how they've shared it within their local communities and in their life, and how they engage with brands, so that you might hear some tips and tricks and see something similar to your own story, so that you feel empowered to continue to take action. So welcome, everybody. I'd like to welcome the three people that we will be speaking with today. Aisha Barenblatt, who is our founder of Remake. You're going to hear from her on, some revisits to the Pay Up campaign and the initiative that we have going forward. And then we're going to give you a preview of what that looks like live. I'd also like to welcome Britt, I see you there, right? Britt Pickering. She is one of the leaders of Owl Swap at Kennesaw State University, and she took a lot of very proactive and engaged action for the Pay Up campaign. So we're going to talk to her about her experience and her experience with her student community and how they got involved, and the cool intersectionalities there across the diverse student bodies. So I'm really excited for her to talk about that. And Sushmita Mir is also here, and we're going to talk to her about the campaign that they started to help support the work of Pay Up. Remember who made them. So it's a garment maker focused community to, again, turn our attention back to the makers of our clothing. And that's what Remake is very much about. We're very much about giving voice to the women, predominantly women and men, that make our clothes throughout the globe, and how our choices as consumers affect them, and how we can hold brands accountable to support them and empower them and treat them in a way that is not exploitive, but a positive and a fostering. So to give you guys a quick recap of our Pay Up stats, we were able to get 19 brands to agree to pay up. And what does that mean?
Rebecca,
oh, go ahead.
We had a few new victories, including Primark this week. So it's at 21 now.
Oh, amazing, amazing. So 21 brands now agreed to pay up. And for anyone who's new that's joining the call for the first time and doesn't know what that means, Aisha, why don't you tell them, what does it mean to pay up? What were we asking brands to do in this campaign?
Yes, so in order for brands to have paid up, it was essentially honoring the contracts for spring and summer without asking for a change in payment terms, retroactive rebates or discounts, and essentially honoring the original contract terms so that suppliers are paid, and for us knowing, most importantly, that worker communities have recouped their wages for the spring and the summer. So that's what pay up means. There were some brands, particularly like Primark, that were doing some dodgy things around, changing the time of the payment terms. There were others like Children's Place that were demanding discounts retroactively, particularly with suppliers in Ethiopia. And so we never move brands to the good side of the tracker till they honor the original contract terms. So that's what pay up means.
Very good. Thank you so much. And to highlight, kind of the impact that we've made within those 21 brands, the Pay Up campaign was able to get those brands to agree to pay up and unlock $1 billion of orders in Bangladesh alone, and around $22 billion globally. So this was a huge impact, guys. And this impact was driven by your individual actions, by your speaking up and tagging brands and commenting on social media and signing our petition. And we're going to talk to Britt and Sushmita today about that as well, how they took action and empowered their own communities to speak up. So I'd like to get started by doing so. I just checked in with Sushmita. Sushmita, if you're here, can you speak up? Can you raise your hand and say hi?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sushmita.
Hi. Good morning. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for joining. So I gave you a very brief intro that you were one of the 3 co-founders of Remember Who Made Them, of the campaign that is highlighting the garment makers and kind of shining a spotlight on the conditions that garment makers work in globally, and helping to highlight the need for these reforms within the global fashion industry. But I'd like for you to just kind of give us a quick intro to what, Remember Who Made Them means to you, and why you and your 2 other co-founders decided to start this movement.
We actually started an online platform on Instagram. It's called Who Made Your Clothes. It's called Who Made and a dot and then Your Clothes. So it's my 2 of my friends and I started this platform, and one of them is based in Bangladesh, Dhaka, Bangladesh, where everything is, kind of taking place. 2 of us are in Toronto, and 2 of us are based in Toronto. And we kind of came across articles, like my friend Anushka and Takwa, Anushka kind of sent me an article about how garment workers are being underpaid. So she was like, oh, we should do something about it, that this isn't fair. And then immediately I was like, yeah, for sure. But what is there that we can do about it? We just, we're just 3 students, we're 21-year-olds. What can we do about it? It's not like we have connections or anything. It's not like we're affiliated with any organization. And then we started brainstorming ideas. And then at first it started off with an email template. So we were like, okay, let's make an email template and we will put it on our own Instagram bios, make our accounts public, and ask our friends to email them. And then we started brainstorming more, like what more can we do about it? So after that, it went on like, oh, maybe we should, create a Facebook page. Maybe we should create an Instagram page. And that's how we landed on the idea that we have to create an Instagram page, because we did take a lot of our friends' opinions and we asked them, what can we do about it? What do you think will be most effective? And then they said, oh, why don't you, 2 of them said, why don't you open an Instagram account? That'll, Instagram is the new hub, it's the new Facebook, everyone's on Instagram. You can use hashtags there, you can, and that's where she told me about Remake Our World. So that's how we got to know about Remake Our World, and we went through Remake's account, and then we got to know about Clean Clothes campaign. So there are a lot of accounts, and then we took inspiration from them, and we finally made the account. And we started creating content, and we started doing a lot of research. And our content was mostly based on the Bangladeshi workers and their struggles. And being from Bangladesh, we did have some connections to factory workers, like our relatives or our friends' fathers and stuff like that. So we got in contact with whoever we could, and they didn't give us too much information, which is understandable. But we did what we could, and we took information from Remake. We have our resource list on our bio, on our article, on our Instagram page.
And I wanted to ask you, because going back to, speaking to your family members and the garment makers that are based in Bangladesh, one of the things that you and I talked about that was so critical in, being able to amplify your voice and being able to amplify this campaign and really get it off the ground, was that one-on-one connection, was speaking with individuals, one-on-one, and not only, from your perspective of, kind of finding out the story and finding out what was going on, but also in how you engaged with your audience, and, you talked about how the more information you gave, the more detailed you were about the specific conditions, about what was going on, the more inclined people were to repost the information or to talk about it. And the more that you engaged with people directly through social media, if they left a comment, you replied and you gave information. If they asked a question, you answered it. And I think that interaction was so critical in making people feel engaged and involved. So I'd love for you to talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. That interaction was actually crucial. It was the essence of the movement for us, because we wanted people to know what was going on and we wanted them to read. So marketing also came into place here because at first we would post a lot of things, like our actual post, the picture would have a lot of words, a lot of information, and people wouldn't read that. That post would not get many, it wouldn't have a good outreach. And then and then as we went on, we realized that, okay, we have to short it, like cut it down. We have to use less words and put everything in the caption. So that's what we started doing. And people actually took interest in the post. A lot of people messaged us, they DM'd us asking us about the situation. A lot of people DM'd us asking us, oh, like, I'm not gonna support these brands. I was just about to place an order, but I'm not gonna do it anymore. Do you know any ethical fashion brands? So we gave them like the names of some thrift stores based on where they were. If they were in Toronto, we could obviously help them with that. So that was very interesting because we got a lot of engagement, and that's exactly what we wanted. If we didn't structure our posts around audience engagement, we wouldn't get I don't think we would be successful in this campaign, because it's not just us, it's not just us three, it's not just all of us that are doing it. It's every single person, every demographic, every single person. It's every single user. So
I love that. I think one thing that's so important for our Remake audience to understand is how they also have the ability to be in that role, to be the kind of person that puts the information out there to talk about pay up and talk about why it's important to them, but then to be able to answer those questions. One thing that's so powerful about the Remake movement is individual ambassadors and community members having those one-on-one conversations with their family, with their partner, with their coworkers, with their friends. As you said when we chatted, regular people talking to their regular circle. We don't need influencers with 100,000 followers just putting out a post, to make themselves feel better, and then no one takes action because they think, oh, I'm just one of 100,000 followers. What difference does it make? We want our community to understand that it doesn't matter if your sphere of influence is only 10 people. Speaking to those 10 people about what matters to you and why it's important is incredibly powerful. And I think you guys saw that increase your momentum very quickly.
Yes, for sure. In the beginning, we talked to our family about it, like our family group chats, my parents, my friend's parents, and they promoted the page on their Facebook. They're on Facebook, they're not on Instagram. So they promoted it on their Facebook. And then from there, we could see like a lot of like the demographic shifted. Initially, we were hoping for like 15 or 16 to 25, whatever, whoever's on Instagram mostly. But when they promoted it on their Facebook, a lot of their colleagues, a lot of their friends, a lot of people in their age group actually interacted with us, and they asked for the Instagram handle. They messaged me saying, oh, what's going on? And then I talked to them about it. And then we also got our friends the friends that I made here in Toronto, I got them to promote it, and they did a great job promoting it. And I got my friends from Bangladesh to promote it. One of the co-founders, Pakwa, she's based in Bangladesh. She goes to Brack University there, so she got her friends from there to promote it. So the fact that we had such a global outreach was very helpful, and the fact that we could talk to people one-on-one about it. Like you said, like our ambassadors at Remake, you don't have to have 1 million followers, 10,000 followers. It's regular people having these regular conversations with other regular people, because at the end of the day, we are the consumers. It's not the people with 10 million followers that are buying from H&M and Gap. It's us. So we need to have this conversation amongst ourselves.
I love that you also brought up how you spoke to your family and how some of that family was an older demographic who maybe wasn't on Instagram, right? And I think one of the things that is so critical about this conversation is speaking to people wherever they are in their journey. A lot of people talk about how they're intimidated to approach sustainable fashion because they're not perfect and they don't have all the answers and they don't have this perfectly ethical wardrobe. And in my conversations, a lot of my older family members have kind of said, said, well, what's the point? Like, I've already bought everything I've bought. I'm kind of where I am. And so I think that's so interesting that even your older family members were engaged and took action. Do you have any takeaways that you think would be helpful for the people watching to engage with members of their family as well?
I guess you just have to sit down and actually break it down for them, because they obviously know well, for us, I think it was easier because my parents and their colleagues and their friends live in Bangladesh, and they know of the situation because it's all around us. The poverty, the exploitation is all around us. But for, like, I explained the situation to one of my friends' moms over here, and that was kind of difficult because she was born and brought up here, so she didn't really grasp the she didn't understand what was going on. Like, why, she was very confused as to why they're not being paid. Why would companies do that? They have so much money, and that's the issue. These companies have so much money and they're not paying their workers, and that's what puts them at a bad light. So you really have to, well, yeah, you have to sit them down and break it down for them, and you have to attack the company's brand image. Like, that's not just for the older people, but it's for everyone. It's just, you have to really dig down on the company's brand image, because that's what they care about most. And if you can, if you can make sure, if you can tell them that, oh, Gap is doing this, Gap is such a well-known company, but they're not paying their workers, and visualizing it, like Aisha and I discussed it once in one of our meetings, that putting a vision to putting it, visualizing it really helps, because when people see that these people are actually in poverty, and people's idea of poverty is very different. Someone who was brought up here, their idea of poverty is completely different from where I was brought up. I've seen poverty like up front, and it's completely different. So you really need to paint that picture in people's minds, that this is what poverty is like there, and this is how they're suffering. These people are living on $96 per month, and they're running their whole family surrounding that money, with that money. So these statistics and painting a picture and actually breaking it down really helps.
Absolutely. And I think the storytelling element is so key. I mean, you have that incredible, perspective to be able to directly speak with your family there in Bangladesh. But to that point, telling the story and not just saying, oh, here's an Instagram title, here's an action, this is a trend, it's trending, everybody's doing this. But to really tell the story of human lives and the people who this actually affects. Aisha, I'd love for you to speak about that, because that's one of the key tenets that Remake uses to communicate their message, is actually hearing directly from the garment makers and hearing their story. And how did that play into this Pay Up campaign?
Yeah, I think one of the things to share with you all as the closest community is the work that we were doing behind the scenes. I think there was this sense, especially once we were in Vogue and the September issue, which is, oh my gosh, that's the Bible, and Remake was featured on there. There's sort of the glossy front part. But I think one of the ways that our movement is so different is that we really pay attention and listen really closely to what garment workers were telling us directly, as well as suppliers. So every week since March, we've been holding coalition calls, 7 a.m. every Thursday, where it's a group of frontline labor organizers. We started in Bangladesh, but then we expanded to Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, who are giving a sense of what's happening. We were also talking to a lot of suppliers around, order cancellation, so we could back up the claims from a data-driven standpoint. And that was really important in terms of listening to communities rather than just speaking out of turn without having a sense of what was happening. I think as I reflect back on what was most successful with Pay Up, it was really that it was a hearts and mind conversation, right? We had the data from BGMEA, from other suppliers, working with Worker Rights Consortium to say, these are the brands that have canceled. We've surveyed these suppliers. We know that they are waiting for brands to pay up. But then with the smartphone, we were also able to get workers to record very short videos of what was happening, share that with the BBC, share that with NBC, and really put a human face on the lives that were impacted. And so really build this empathy around, look, I make $96 a month. It is now June, it is now July, and I'm not asking for charity. What I'm asking simply for is good business practice and for my wages to be paid. So the fact that we were really able to tap into these grassroots communities and get video footage and testimonial out, as well as back it up with data, because I will tell you, as we started to go after brands, the initial instinct was often, we're going to sue you, or how do you know that these facts are correct? And really coming from a place of denial. And so the data really had to be airtight for us to say, no, we have proof from your suppliers, from industry associations that this is what you've done. And so that was really important. But, I love that we started with Shushmita, because I know in the early days, when you DM'd our Instagram account, there was this question of, can I repost? Is that okay? Is that allowed? And, for us, Remake has always been a movement around how do we create assets that then you take forth and make relevant in your own community. So the initial conversation with Sushmita was absolutely. But I think then we had some few follow-up Zoom conversations around how do I have the confidence to do this? And Sushmita and her friends were like, we have the data, we have the images, our Instagram is blowing up, but a nervousness to an extent. And so we did a lot of sort of coaching on the back end, and I was like, who better than you? Who better than you to represent the Bangladeshi diaspora, to go out there and to speak to your family, your friends, your college colleagues, and tell them what's happening. And I think in many ways, you are a better ambassador than us, just speaking from the mothership that is Remake. And so for all of you to know that that's also available to you, reaching out to us one-on-one and having some of that coaching around, you can do this. Because I know initially there's that fear, right? I'm going to post, and how's it going to go? And, am I going to be attacked? And I know, we even had some conversation, Shishmita, around safety, because, you were getting some DMs around, well, who are you guys? And, you're taking on this big bad industry, and, making it very clear it's better to hide behind the Instagram handle or the Remake community rather than outing yourself, because there is such a cancel culture online. So I think there were lots of good lessons learned from just how our global community stood up, from worker organizers, supplier partners, to all of us as citizens and shoppers.
Yes, I don't want that to discourage anyone from speaking out. Like I want everyone to make sure that you do still feel confident in speaking out. And I think that's a great transition. Thank you so much, Sushmita, for sharing. And I'm going to come back to you in a bit, but I also want to speak to Britt. Can you unmute yourself? And I want to actually take what Aisha just said and transition that to how you, through the Owl Shop, Instagram, and through your work at Kennesaw State University, how you empowered the students to kind of talk about this. Because one of the things that, you had said to me was that the students get really discouraged when they see these big actions happening in the world and they feel like they can't take action. But Payout was free for them to participate in, and it was easy to do from their phone. And so can you kind of talk about that, how you started to speak to the students, how you use your platform, and how you kind of empowered them to start to talk about this issue?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, I feel like a lot of students feel powerless and disheartened by everything going on. There's so many things going on in the world, from Black Lives Matter movement to this Pay Up campaign, the pandemic. Like, there's just a lot happening, and as an individual, you feel very helpless and like you can't do something. And as just a college student, like, what can you do? So I think this campaign, it first off being free to access, like all my students have a smartphone, and it's so easy to put a hashtag, and their collective voice of coming together becomes so powerful. And I think that's why this campaign was so successful. Everyone had access to be able to call out a brand and say, we're not okay with this, pay up. Yeah, so it's free. It's, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that I want everyone to also understand that a lot of the ways, if you do feel powerless, that, you don't have to have money, to make a stand, that, you can make a stand with your consumer choices. But that having a smartphone or having internet access to simply speak directly to these brands one-on-one, I think, Britt, that was one of the things that you were very empowered and you took very proactive about, was directly going into these individual brands, Instagrams, and making those comments so that other viewers that were following that brand could see that, and who might not have been following that brand because they were aware of the Pay Up campaign, but might have just been following that brand because they were a regular consumer. So can you talk about how you took that action and what that looked like and what inspired you to do that, and kind of how that conversation happened?
Yeah, absolutely. I think to be able to reach out to a brand, like, it's so hard to get in touch with brands. I've taken part in so many like email campaigns, like talking to brands about their practices, and they just don't respond. So being able to get this on their social media where it's going to get the attention of the people in charge who make the decisions, being able to call them out for, like when all these brands are posting about the Black Lives Matter movement and saying they support Black individuals, like, well, you aren't if you aren't paying your garment workers. 80% of garment workers are women of color. Like, so not women, 80% of garment workers are women of, yeah. So yeah, just going on there and calling them out and saying, like, this is not okay. You're being hypocritical by saying this, like, you're not supporting people, or you're exploiting people by making this t-shirt that's you're selling to try to support a movement. Like, it doesn't make any sense. But just putting that on our Instagram, we got like a lot of comments from students being like, oh, I was going to buy something from Urban Outfitters this week, but now instead I'm not. I'm going to go shop on Depop or ThredUp or go to my local thrift store, and I'm going to spend this weekend or my evening commenting and hashtagging on their post. And so that was really empowering to see.
It is, and it's really impactful too. I think that's one thing that's important for, that you probably conveyed to your students, that again, I want to convey to the Remake community and the viewers, is that it's kind of like your vote, right? Like, you think, oh, what does my one comment matter? What is my one post? What is my one hashtag? What is my one signature to the campaign matter? But if you are one of hundreds and thousands that are commenting, then that becomes something that brands cannot ignore. If there's hundreds of thousands of people signing petitions, and there's thousands of people commenting on your social media asking you, why aren't you paying your workers? What's going on? How can you keep posting about sales and shareholder payouts when you're not actually, paying the people who made your clothes? Collectively, that voice becomes something that brands have to address. They can no longer ignore it. And so I want everyone to understand how much power you do have, because it's not just you, it's you within this movement. It's your voice within a collective movement, and that makes such an impact.
I mean, just from a data standpoint, and Britt is part of one of our signal groups where, we decide we're going to go after a particular brand, and then just the power of all of us coming together and talking to colleagues over at Worker Rights Consortium and Clean Clothes Campaign. There was this question of, how did you guys get 270,000 signatures on the Pay Up petition? Were you using ads? It's like, nope, we don't have money for that. What did it? And honestly, it was all of you. The higher the numbers got, the more brands started to pay attention, and the comments on brands pages really do work. I did a postmortem with Gap, and Gap was an interesting example because, unlike some of the other companies, they were in financial trouble at the beginning of the pandemic. We weren't sure, but we were really chasing after them because of how much money they owed. And part of what they shared with me was when people started to leave comments on Athleta, which from a reputation sensitivity standpoint was the most for them because it is their most sustainable under the Gap Inc. umbrella, their comms people started to get nervous. And so then that got escalated all the way to their CEO to say, we can't post anything. We're trying to get rid of inventory. We're trying to, sell product. And every time we post a discount or an ad, it just gets taken over by pay up, pay up, pay up. And that's really what made them eventually, kicking and screaming, do that. So that's really the power of us as a collective.
And even with brands,
no, go ahead.
Even with brands like Primark trying to mute people's comments, people still found a way to call them out by posting on their story and tagging Primark and hashtag pay up. And then guess what? They've paid up. So
Yeah.
And
the
Primark is
power
a
of social
classic
media.
example of someone who was really going on hyperdrive around PR. At the beginning of the pandemic, they were like, oh, we're going to set a workers' fund. And they thought it'll just make us go away. And the truth is, like, that fund never came to fruition. And then they were like, oh, yes, we'll pay up. But they had set up such long lead times that it was essentially going to push factories out of business. And so we're like, no, that's not good enough either. And so just making our demands laser focused and clear that we will not stop campaigning unless you stop asking for discounts, you don't change contractual terms. This week, after months of reneging, and with Primark, it was also to say, look, it's September. And so we're not going to jump up and down the way we would have maybe if you had paid up in March, because in many ways, the damage has already been done. Think of workers that live paycheck to paycheck, and you're finally now paying up for spring orders, but it's September.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Britt, I think that also goes back to, when you talked about how the students themselves felt kind of powerless against a brand like Primark, against a brand like Gap. That's really incredible to see that, okay, if I do post, if I do engage, if I do hashtag, if I do add them to my stories, it feels empowering, right? And you can take action that feels effective just within whatever means you have, just within that smartphone or just on social media. You talked about how you kind of host these bi-weekly meetings in sustainability and fashion with your student group. And one of the things that you just kind of, the way that you approach us was just to ask them, like, hey, did you even know this was happening? Because I think for a lot of people outside the fashion community, like Sushmita talked about with the mother of a friend here, not in Bangladesh, but they're in Toronto, they had no idea. So when you did approach your students and say, hey, did you know this was happening? What were the responses and how did people respond when you kind of broke this down for them?
Yeah, no, a lot of people didn't know what was going on. Of course, my students that are more in tune with the sustainable fashion movement were aware, and on top of it, as soon as they saw the campaign launching, they were reading articles about it and asking me, like, all right, what are we doing? Like, this is awful. On top of a pandemic happening, these workers are not being paid. So, sorry, my brain is, can you repeat? I totally lost track of.
No, don't worry at all. It was just, how did you talk to how did you bring up that conversation? Like to the students who weren't those like tuned in, plugged in, sustainable fashion people, how do you bring up that conversation of like, hey, did you know this was happening? And like,
right.
What information did you give them? Because I think a lot of people in this community, we might have a few people in our lives who are tuned into this, fellow ambassadors, but for most people, the majority of their coworkers, their family are people who are completely unaware of this. So I'm curious how you kind of started that conversation with the people who were not in this circle and didn't know what was happening.
Yeah, no, we just looked at articles and I would share articles with them. I would kind of talk about it. If they wanted more information, I would compile a list of resources for students like, hey, if you want to take action, here's the link to the petition. If you want to take action, here's how you can take steps on social media to comment. And just sharing resources. So we have like a large group chat with all the students, sharing articles every week. And then we have just a wonderful access on campus, being able to post and share stuff. So it's not just students, but the word is getting out to like, and they're telling their parents. And then I had someone's mom message me and be like, I didn't know this was happening. And now she made an Instagram to learn how to hashtag just so she could participate in this. Cause she's like, I want to do something.
That's so cool.
So it's so neat to see people just see it spread and spread. And just from the students talk about it, they tell someone else and it gets passed on and on and on.
Yeah. That's so important. I love that we're hearing a lot of these parents getting involved. One of the other things that I want you to talk about was how you mentioned the intersectionality of this. So, you have the owl swap and people, for anyone who's listening, it's a way to exchange clothes and be engaged with sustainable fashion and kind of learn tips and tricks and learn what's going on. But the student body at Kennesaw State University is so diverse. And you talked about how, a lot of people think, oh, fashion, that's just, oh, that doesn't really affect me. I'm not into fashion, not a big deal. But, you and I said, like, nobody leaves the house naked every day, right? So whether you like it or not, you participate in the apparel industry because you buy clothing and you wear it. So, anyone who doesn't leave the house naked every day, which is, I assume all of us, you are engaging as a consumer and you do have an impact on the lives of garment workers. So there's that realization, but then you also talked about the intersectionality of people who, care about the climate crisis and, who are involved, in, engineering capacities or environmental capacities, and how the fashion industry does actually affect them too. So can you kind of talk about that intersectionality and how you use that to get students engaged?
Yeah, that's something I found really interesting ever since we founded Alice Swap. So we started with just clothing swaps on campus, but we've expanded just to encourage others to incorporate sustainable habits into their everyday lives. And every single student, no matter what your major is, I can tell you how it relates. So we have from nursing majors to history majors, geography, engineers, and we talk about the health impacts of fashion. If you care about sustainability, all right, great. If you care about women's rights, if you care about race issues, like there's so many things tie into fashion. Name something, it relates to it. Water pollution, clothing going to landfills, like it's just, even agriculture ties. You don't think about growing our clothes, right? There's a whole thing that ties into that. So we get students involved from so many different majors from nearly every college at the university. I think we have students involved. And then we have professors wanting to get involved and offer extra credit because they realize, oh, this ties to my course in this way. It can tie to a business course. It can tie to a geography course. So it's really, really neat to see just how clothing really does connect us all. And I think it's something that's so easy to make a change and make a positive impact with. One of my favorite quotes is, if you want to change the world, it starts with the clothes on your back and the shoes on your feet. Elizabeth Klein, but just letting people know, like, it's so simple to have such a big impact by just changing little habits. And we don't all need to be perfect, sustainable fashion, perfect with sustainable fashion. We just need a bunch of people doing it imperfectly to make a really big impact. And I think that's what we realized at the university, starting just a small group of students. This started out of a class of 9 students, and it's grown into these huge events with hundreds and hundreds of people attending for our different events. And just our impact and reach is so far now. And it's a positive impact, not only on our local community, but it has a positive global impact as well.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so cool. I think that intersectionality is so important for people who want to know how to engage maybe with their coworkers. Maybe you think at your job, oh, my job has nothing to do with sustainable fashion, but how can you draw those connections? Because there are those connections to be drawn no matter what you're interested in or what you're engaged in professionally. There's a way to make those connections. So I think that's a really important
it's
thing.
Also, one of the things that sets us apart, like you all heard Shushmita speak and Britt speak, and Rebecca, you're so passionate about this. You host these calls as the Remake ambassadors, that we really come from a place of empathy and kindness. We're not these sort of scary activists shouting out at people where, it shuts down everyone when you have something to say because you just seem so angry and ready to cancel them. And I think, to Britt's point, it's about, small imperfect steps rather than having it all figured. I was, frankly, really nervous when we launched the Payout campaign, just having so much empathy on everything that was happening in all of our personal lives. We often talk about at Remake, we bring our whole selves to the community. And so many of you had been sharing with us, offline, around people getting sick in your lives, being furloughed or laid off yourself, moving back home and living with your parents, which was a whole other challenge. And I think in some ways, Payout for all of us was this galvanizing movement to say, the world may not make sense right now, but this is something that I can actually do. And I can do it in a way that feels empowering. I can do it in a way that it feels like I'm making a difference. And actually, it helps me connect to a community and a purpose, rather than feeling like this one more task I have to do. And to me, that's really been the beauty of this movement. I remember back in spring when my own mom got COVID in Pakistan, and I'm here in California. I was so worried, and I think I sort of fueled all my rage and excess energy into Payout, because there was this sense of, okay, this is something I have control over. With every brand that we get to do what's right, we get some more women paid. We get more wages in the hands of people that need it most. And I think that's really the power of what we've seen here with Shushmita, with Britt, and with all of you.
Absolutely. I have some 3-year-old toddler noise in the background, so I muted. Absolutely. And so thank you for bringing all that together. And I think, so much, comes from hearing voices like Sushmita's and like Britt. So I hope you can all kind of see yourselves in one of those scenarios, whether it's, how to use your voice, or feeling brave, feeling inspired, taking simple actions that do lead up to big change. I hope you've heard something that will help you understand how to use your own voice to be part of this movement and to feel empowered to really make a change, because it makes a big difference. I would like to transition now to something really exciting. I've been waiting eagerly this whole call to show this to you guys. So, one thing that's really important that we understand with this Pay Up movement, while it was a very focused campaign, focused around the effect of that COVID had on the fashion industry, very, very hyper focused on orders that were canceled, in early March and April, and work that hasn't been paid for. What this brought to light was the glaring fact that these issues are systemic. They're not due to just one-off pandemics and one-off issues here and there. They're systemic and pervasive in the industry. And so the work of the Pay Up movement is not done. It's only just begun. And, citizens and garment workers are organizing to change the future of fashion, and here's why. So we're gonna talk through this, right? COVID brought a light to how the world's 50 million garment workers toil for poverty wages while sewing these clothes for the world's wealthiest brands. And workers are dying of coronavirus on the job in Los Angeles, in Bangladesh, being imprisoned and beaten for speaking out, for taking action, and for demanding their wages. And they're facing starvation all around the globe. And the $2.5 trillion fashion industry is failing these workers. And it's not because they don't have the means, it's because of the choices that they're making in the name of profit. And we have the power as consumers to really drive that change. So, these fashion brands and retailers are unable on their own to address the urgent need for human rights in the fashion system. The core function of their business, as they have proven with these cancellation orders, is to protect those profits, to keep the shareholders happy, to keep cash flow positive, and choosing all of that over human lives. And so any roadmap to this fashion recovery must instead focus around the garment makers themselves, their needs, and what role they play in this, and giving them a voice, right? So this is an opportunity, right? And so we're going to look at what happens next for the future of fashion, because the Pay Up movement has shown what's possible when you, as an ambassador, speak up and use your voice to hold these brands accountable. It can make real change happen. So this is exciting. This call to action is led by the garment makers and labor organizers. It's supported by citizens and you, fashion lovers around the world. And it's a set of demands that brands and retailers must support. So without further ado, let's take a look at, I'm going to share my screen with you guys, and we're going to walk through the new Pay Up site. You will have access to this. It's a live site.
And you're the first ones to see it. So this has been a real labor of love, but we're so excited to show it to all of you. And just sort of one quick second on who the authors of this new manifesto and 7-point demand is. I had a hand in writing this, as did the incredible Elizabeth Klein, who you all know with her books and her campaigning. But also most important is Sheila Niroshi, who is a former garment worker who is now running an incredible organization called Stand Up Lanka, and Nazma Akhtar, who was a former child laborer who now represents one of the largest unions in Bangladesh and is the executive director of the Awaj Foundation. And so this is really us coming together as labor organizers, as garment workers, as concerned citizens, which is very different because historically anything to do with the future of fashion is often written and paid for by brands. And this is different because it centers workers first.
Very exciting. So this is payupfashion.com, and you can go there right now. And we're going to walk you through the site, and we're going to talk about how we're taking that original Pay Up petition that you signed, and we're amplifying it, and we're really
adding. Some of these beautiful photos, you might see yourself in there. There's a box here with the beautiful Arizona Muse. We were so excited about some of the models who really rose up to use their platform for good. But you also see Nazma and Ashila and other garment workers holding up signs for Pay Up. And I think it just really embodies, all of us as women, from maker to model, coming together.
And if you feel left out because you're not here, please take a picture. It's not too late. You can still post a selfie on social media with the Pay Up hashtag and the Pay Up sign, and we absolutely encourage you to do that. So when you come to the site, you're going to see, the tenets of Pay Up Fashion. The first thing that we ask you to do, we know you already signed the change.org petition, and we're so grateful for that. We need you to sign this petition. So it's a new
starting Thursday. So this is a sneak peek, but one of the things that we are doing on the back end is essentially for the brands that we'll be petitioning for this next phase of Pay Up, all of their sourcing, merchandising, CEO executives are going to be getting the email directly from you. And so we wanted to give you a sneak peek, but we'll have a whole set of assets to share on our Slack channel as well as on our Google Hangouts, with us starting to drive signatures come Thursday of this week.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things that's so important. And Aisha, you could talk about how powerful that was the first time around with Pay Up, is that these executives get an email every time that change.org petition was signed, and they're going to get an email every time this one is signed. And I think that's one of the things that you found to be, incredibly impactful. And I think it also helps people understand. You're like, oh, I'm just signing a petition, I'm just adding a name, what's the big deal? No, you're actually, your signature is sending an email to one of these executives. So how Britt talked about, well, we don't have these people's emails, we don't know how to get in touch with them. If you want to sign this petition, we'll send an email on your behalf, and it makes a big impact.
And one of the things I think we realized through Pay Up is, for those of you considering careers that are making a difference in fashion, is how sustainability functions within brands are often not the ones making the most strategic and important decisions. It became very clear that it was head of sourcing that was changing the order schedules, or it's, the CEO that makes the eventual call. And so one of the differences here with our petition is, rather than us talking to the PR functions or the sustainability functions within brands, this is going to decision makers within the company.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So as you'll scroll through the site, you have the opportunity to sign this petition here. And of course, we want you to share it. Sharing it is one of the things that made the original Pay Up campaign so impactful. So please, take it one step further. And after you sign it, please do share it. So let's go through the tenets of Pay Up Fashion and what the Pay Up campaign looks like moving into the future, and how this can be a long-standing campaign to create more impact. So the first action is, of course, asking brands to pay up.
There's still about half the brands who haven't done that. And we do think, especially as we're walking into the fall, think about Arcadia, Topshop, EWM, there's particular brands where paying up would still make a huge difference.
Absolutely. So if you'll note, we're not going to go into all these details, but as you note, when you go through the site, you can click under each action to see more information about what the demands are, because they're very specific. This is not vague what we're asking brands and retailers to do. This outlines a very clear plan of the actions that we're asking them to commit to and what this will look like in practice. So you can look through and kind of see what the demands call for, and how, this will encourage brands to take action, because it can remove them, from the Pay Up tracker banner where they're being called out, as being a brand who's not paying up. And we've seen how effective that is. Action number 2 is to keep workers safe. Aisha, would you like to kind of talk through what does worker safety really mean?
Yeah, and so one of the things that we've done has really, we believe that we're stronger together. So collaborating with lots of incredible labor organizer groups, both grassroots and global. And what we know from talking to worker communities every day is that there has been a climate of fear as workers have been out on the streets protesting. There's been a lot of union busting under the guise of COVID. And really what we're asking for is a push that, first of all, to keep workers safe, they need wage wages in their hands. You know, a lot of factories are starting to shutter. You're starting to see a consolidation within the supply base. And so what we're needing is severance to be paid when workers are laid off, because a lot of women in particular are reporting that severance that is legally owed to them is not being paid. So at least till year end, we need wages, we need severance. But safety also ties to assuring that there isn't union busting happening, that workers aren't up against state-sponsored violence for asking for what's legally owed to them. In talking to the Solidarity Center and other union leaders, it's clear that when brands speak up, it really helps when it comes to freedom of association and bargaining. And so that's what we mean by safety. All 7 of these points have been ordered in terms of what's most important to do now versus as we move to the spring. So this is essentially an entire worker-centric, planet-centric vision for fashion's future, but it starts with pay up and keep workers safe. And then we move to some of the other things that get to the root cause of how did we get here to begin with. And that starts with transparency. You know, so much of transparency right now is paid for and controlled by brands. Brands will tell us, well, I've published, you know, my tier 1 supplier list, and so therefore I'm transparent, or I publish a 90-page corporate responsibility report, and that makes me transparent. But we've really taken the energy to say, well, if transparency was more about us as citizens being empowered and everyday workers being empowered, what is it that we'd actually need? And what we need is to know how much are workers paid, what are the working conditions like in factories, who and how this is made, and to put it out in the public domain. You know, for too long, the multi-million-dollar audits, a lot of brands will say, we are auditing, and so hence we are assuring that we are transparent, but none of that audit data is available to worker communities themselves or to any of us as citizens. And so when we talk about going transparent, it's putting all that data out in the public domain. This is really near and dear to my heart, give workers center stage. I don't know how many of you who go to sustainability conferences, who go to fashion shows and events, you know, Copenhagen Fashion Summit is coming up. There are so many multi-stakeholder initiatives like the Ethical Trading Initiative in the UK, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition here in the US. And none of them have adequate worker representation. And so this is something I think we can all do, whether it's, you know, you're invited to, I never take public speaking engagements anymore unless there's worker representation. I refuse to be a part of conferences or panels where you don't have people of color, but particularly people that are making our clothes. And so as different events and conferences come up, we're really going to run with the worker first hashtag to say, unless you have 50% representation, and not just of workers, but women worker voices, then this conference is rubbish. Or this multi-stakeholder initiative can't be pushing sustainability because it simply doesn't represent the end customer, which is workers. And, you know, as we move from point 5 to 7, and again, we've worked with human rights experts, we've worked with organized, these are sort of the silver bullet, right? It's to say, if, and this is really in some ways normalizing these conversations with brands, but also with press. And for any of you that do press engagement, it's to say, how can what happened in COVID happen never again? And in order for that to happen, we need enforceable contracts. And the truth is, a quarter century of sustainability initiatives that have been voluntary have only taken us so far. And so the silver bullet here that we really need, you'll see in point 6, is we need enforceable laws. And there is a conversation that is coming back, you know, right here in California with Senate Bill 1399 that didn't pass in the fall, but we're going to take that fight back up in the spring. The EU mandatory law when it comes to due diligence that's being considered. You know, a lot of lawmakers and policymakers are saying, the industry by itself is not going to do this. So enforceability of contracts and assuring laws and regulations, and that brands' public policy efforts aren't thwarting these efforts, is going to be really important for us to be demanding from the press. And so, you know, as Rebecca said, we want you to read at your leisure, come back with questions that have an animated conversation around, you know, why do we need living wages, enforceable laws? But these are some of the incredible early organizations that have signed on with us. I think some of you are already part of Extinction Rebellion as well. As I said, you know, Garment Worker Center here in LA, Stand Up Movement Lanka. So these are really worker-centric organizations. We're going to continue to have more signatories of other worker-led groups. But the hope is really to say we're going to rewrite and no longer let brands pay for and market to us what the future of fashion must look like.
That is so exciting. Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to just let you take it away because no one says it better than you. So thank you everyone for previewing that. Again, please, you can go check out the site right now. As of Thursday, do you want them to hold their signatures on the petition till Thursday? Okay, great.
Yes.
So if you—
And one of the things that we'll do is send you all social media assets, ready to go copy, things to post on Instagram, and essentially run the campaign starting with Pay Up and Keep Workers Safe. And then as we walk into 2021, we'll be focusing on some of the other transparency and other pledges. If you do really quickly, Rebecca, click on the brand tracker. For those of you wondering how we selected these 40 brands, it's because they represent over 97% of fashion's profits. And so we strongly believe that if we could get any movement from these 40 brands, these are the ones that will really change and reframe the industry. Obviously, within the Remake seal of approval, there's some incredible smaller brands where we shop our values, but I wanted to give you all some context around why we're targeting these particular brands. And up there, you'll see currently you're able to click and it'll show you who's paid up and who hasn't. But as we go through the other commitments, we'll also be able to update that on the brand page. Who's gone transparent, who's committed to living wages, who's thinking about enforceable contracts. So this would really be a clearinghouse for all of you to see brand transparency.
And Aisha, would you say that if a brand is on the Pay Up Yes, that's kind of like a clear, pass for the consumer to feel good and to feel safe about purchasing from these brands?
I mean, look, for a brand to pay up is the very minimum, and we at Remake know, we think of ourselves so much as citizens rather than consumers. A lot of these brands, the H&Ms of the world, they have a lot of problems. They're fast fashion brands that are out there, polluting at staggering rates, plundering our natural resources, engaged in union busting cases. So I wouldn't say just because you've paid up, from my perspective, that's the bare minimum. And so if you click on any of these brand pages, Rebecca, you'll see, what we have is what are some of the other things to truly make a brand sustainable. And right now, none of them represent worker voices, have enforceable contracts, pay living wages. So the fight really continues.
Absolutely. And I think that's important to understand that of all of these tenants, kind of understand where they stand. So, click through so that you can see, okay, yes, they have paid up, but where else do they have work to do so that you as a consumer can make the most informed choice. Thank you so much. This is super exciting. Again, you guys, this is the very sneakiest of sneak previews. So you're getting to see this before anyone else. I just got access to this new version of the site right before the call. So it is very brand new and we're excited for you guys to see it. So we encourage you to engage with that and share with your community on Thursday once we send you all those assets. In the 1 minute that we have left, I just wanted to give a quick recap of our No New Clothes campaign because it was very, very engaged and exciting. And so I want to share the wins from that. We had 1,145 participants in the campaign, which is so amazing. And I think what's so impactful about that is seeing how you're signing on to that, you're taking those actions has a collective impact, a collective momentum. When you feel like, oh, what can I do? It doesn't really make a difference. Well, together it does make a difference. So let me read off these stats for you. The participants of these 1,145 participants, because we took this pledge and we engaged in this action, it is estimated that we preserved 16 million gallons of water, 6 million pounds of CO2 emissions were prevented, 23,000 pounds of waste was prevented from going to the landfill, and we ourselves saved $260,000 by not buying new clothes. And these are obviously estimates and averages, and we don't claim that these are an exact science, But the point is to see that the collective impact that that has by taking these pledges and making these actions when we all do it together. So we are so thankful for you doing that. We're thankful for you supporting these movements because your individual voice does matter and it does make a big difference. So thank you everyone for joining. Please be on the lookout for those assets that we will be sending out via email, via Instagram, via Facebook, via Slack, so that you can promote the new payupfashion.com site to support the future of fashion and to carry all the momentum that you have helped create forward to really make a difference.
Yeah, I'll just say, the campaign, the next phase of the campaign will be successful if all of you are engaged. Like together, we can truly, cut past all the PR and the marketing and hold the industry accountable. This is a unique time that we have to tell the fashion industry, no. For a worker-centric model, these 7 things need to happen. So if they're not happening, then, we're not making any progress. So we want you to sign the petition. We want you to share with your friends. And together, I really do think we're going to seize this moment during the pandemic to make fashion think about workers, the planet, and us first.
Awesome. Somebody asked in a comment, how do you get access to the Slack account? We can send that out in the recap of this call. We'll send you access to that so that you can join in, and we encourage you to share your voice there. We're over time, so thank you so much everyone for joining. We greatly appreciate you being here. We greatly appreciate all those individual actions you are taking. Know that your voice does matter and it does make a huge impact. Stay safe. We know that the world is a very crazy place and there's a lot going on. And so if you need support, come join our Slack community and we'll be there for you. Thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful week. Thank you, Aisha. Thank you, Sushmita. Thank you, Britt. Everyone take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you all so much. Take good care. Bye.